headlines: balancing the budget, working out a deal with teachers, and helping to restore emergency services in Leeward and Central Oahu. Those are just some of the issues expected to be addressed today when Governor Neil Abercrombie gives his second State of the State address. Now, top of the mind for many is the potential loss of $75 million in funding for the state schools. The state was put on notice earlier this month that it could lose the money if it did not begin meeting standards set out by the Race to the Top grant requirements. Now, the main issue is the ongoing labor dispute between the state and the teachers union. Last week, the union overwhelmingly voted down a 6-year contract deal. The governor has asked the Hawaii State Teachers Association to present a new plan. Now, the labor dispute was heavily covered by our partners at Civil Beat, and joining us with more insight about that and other State of the State topics is Civil Beat reporter Chad Blair. Good morning, Chad. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. Glad to be here, Mahia.
So in this State of the State, do you think the governor will specifically address the Race to the Top grant and the $75 million that's at risk right now?
It's a good question. It's kind of the elephant in the room. Everybody's talking about it and thinking about it. On the other hand, you don't want your State of the State to be too much of a downer. And the news was actually on Friday, as you mentioned. He said, come back to the table, give us another deal, we'll work this out. I would think the governor would have to acknowledge it. Education is a big priority for this administration.
Speaking of tone, last year's State of the State address, it was very striking in that Governor Abercrombie was almost very somber. He talked about the canoe and how it was at risk of almost turning over. Do you think that the message this time around will be as somber given our current economic climate?
No, I don't think so. You know, I read over the speech last year just over the weekend, and you're absolutely right. The canoe was going to capsize. Big tsunami was heading our way before the real tsunami actually hit. My guess is he'll strike a more upbeat tone. Things definitely are better, but we're not completely out of the woods. So one wonders whether he'll say, let's just be careful here. Let's grow the economy. Let's focus on jobs and sustainability.
Now, this is an election year, and taxes definitely a bad word for many lawmakers. What do you think will happen this year as the governor moves forward with his proposals and lawmakers as they try to get reelected?
Well, there were several proposals in his last State of the State to raise taxes. You remember the soda tax, and the tax on alcohol. We're not thinking the governor's going to do that this year. That isn't to say that the legislature won't consider revenue-raising measures. In fact, the soda tax is something that's out there, but it might come from the legislature rather than the governor.
Let's talk about gambling lastly. And, you know, the governor has a big gambling advocate in his administration now. So do you think he's going to talk about that in his State of the State address?
Well, not only does he have people in his administration, one of his close friends, John Radcliffe, is the leading lobbyist for gambling at the in Hawaii. I don't know if he'll mention it. It's another big elephant in the room. There's a lot of folks that think this is finally the year to get a casino or video poker or some other measure passed. Then again, it's an election year. And remember, all 76 of those lawmakers, because of reapportionment, are running for re-election. So one wonders whether you want to take a chance on a very controversial issue like gambling.
All right. Well, Chad Blair from Civil Beat, it's great to hear from you. And thank you for providing insight to this year's State of the State address.
Anytime I can. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And stay with KITV4 News for special coverage of today's State of the State address. Coming up in our next half hour, we'll have a representative from the governor's office in studio and insight from Civil Beat editor John Temple.